So let's look a little bit closer at your introduction. The first paragraph is called your introduction. It's going to begin with an attention grabber, which is also sometimes called a lead or a hook, depending on who you talk to or where. And it's going to end with a multi-part thesis. So it looks sort of like this, right? The attention grabber is on top, then the thesis is on the bottom. So there's some strategies that you'll use for your attention grabber to invite the reader into the essay and make the reader feel comfortable and welcome. They're going to encourage the reader to keep reading. I'm not focusing too much on the attention grabbers in this particular lecture because we'll look at that in its own lecture about titles, introductions, and conclusions. Now, your explicit thesis. What is an explicit thesis? An explicit thesis is a one-sentence statement that does the following. It will identify the topic of the essay. The topic is who or what you're writing about. The topic should, when you're writing a thesis, an explicit thesis, you should strive to make the topic of the essay the subject of the sentence. When you make that explicit thesis have the topic as the grammatical subject of the sentence, it gives the most grammatical power and weight to that topic. It puts that topic, what you're writing about, who or what you're writing about, at the most important, the strongest point in your entire essay. Since your thesis is like that order of at your restaurant, you want each one of those items in your order to be in the right place. And the topic of the essay should be the grammatical subject of that sentence. Your explicit thesis will also contain a claim about the topic. The claim is what you're saying about the topic. And the claim is also integral of your explicit thesis. It needs to, it's what you're going to say about that topic, and it should be the verb of your thesis statement. Again, because your thesis statement is so important, it should be the verb so that it can have that essential grammatical weight. Because the claim inherently has the action of your thesis, it's what you're trying to prove, it's what you're doing, it should be the verb. And then your explicit thesis should list the reasons why you, the writer, have a particular claim about the topic. So those reasons are the list. They're the reasons why you have the claim that you do about the topic. The reasons will often be in parallel structure as dependent clauses or as phrases in a list at the end of your thesis. You want those reasons to be in subordinate or less important phrases in your thesis so that the topic and the claim, the two most important things, can really shine in that explicit thesis statement. So why should you use an explicit thesis? Can't you just write one that's implied, sort of like assume that your reader knows what you're trying to argue? Well, for one, an explicit thesis helps keep the writer focused. And in college, especially for beginning writers, it's really easy to get off track. So your instructors will want you to write an explicit thesis. It also lets the reader know up front what your essay is going to cover, what ground you're going to cover, where you're going, and what you're doing in your essay. And most importantly, it's what's expected from most college essays. So most of your instructors are going to want to see an explicit thesis like that. Now, as you get into certain classes and certain disciplines, it might be a little more loosey-goosey. You might be able to have an implied thesis when you get into upper division classes or you're in particular disciplines. But by and large, most instructors are going to want you to use an explicit thesis. And if you are thinking that you want to do something a little less ordinary, then you should really talk with your instructor before doing it. Where does your thesis go? It's the last sentence of your introduction paragraph. You always want to have your thesis as the last sentence. And because that's where it's expected to go. It flows logically and rhetorically from your attention grabber to your thesis. Your thesis, if it's at where, that's where your reader is expecting it to be. So you don't want to confuse that. You have to show that you know